Have you ever been driving over a massive bridge and just thought, how in the world is this thing even standing? Well, today we're going to peel back the concrete and steel to reveal the secret life of bridges. It's full of some seriously brilliant solutions that keep them from falling down. You know, when most of us look at a bridge, we just see one big object, right? It's a road that gets us from point A to point B. But if you're an engineer, you see something completely different. It's not one static thing at all. It's a dynamic system, a collection of individual parts, all working together, each one designed to solve a problem you can't even see. And that's what we're digging into today, those incredible hidden solutions. First up, let's talk about force. We're talking about these massive, invisible forces, things like tension and compression, that are constantly, and I mean constantly, trying to pull a bridge apart. So this brings us to a huge engineering problem. Concrete is unbelievably strong when you squeeze it, that's compression, but it's surprisingly weak when you try to pull it apart under tension. So how on earth do you build a concrete bridge that can stretch for hundreds of feet without cracking under all that stress? Well, the answer is a super clever technique called pre-stressing. What engineers do is they build the concrete around these steel cables, they call them tendons, and then they pull those tendons incredibly tight. This puts the concrete into a state of permanent compression. It's basically pre-squeezed, right? So that when the real world tries to pull it apart, it has to overcome that powerful built-in squeeze first. And the way they apply this squeeze is just fascinating. They use these massive hydraulic jacks to pull on the steel tendons. Now, for shorter bridges, they might just jack from one end. It's cheaper. But because of friction, the force gets a little weaker as it goes down the line. For really long spans, though, you have to jack from both ends at the same time. Yeah, it costs more, but it's the only way to make sure the entire bridge gets that even, powerful compression it needs to be safe. And the level of detail here is just amazing. All that force has to be held in place at the ends, which creates these immense stress points. To handle it, engineers use what I like to call the three guardians. You've got spalling reinforcement, which stops the concrete from just chipping away at the anchor points. Then there's equilibrium reinforcement, which handles the stress when you tighten the anchors one after the other. And finally, bursting reinforcement acts kind of like a cage, holding in all that pressure that wants to just burst outwards from behind the anchors. Okay, so we've squeezed the concrete to make it super strong. But a lot of modern bridges are actually put together from these massive pre-made segments. Which brings us to our next challenge. So how do you connect these giant, multi-ton concrete puzzle pieces together and make sure that the seam is just as strong as the concrete itself? I mean, you can't just run down to the hardware store for this one. You need something way more advanced. The solution is this specialized epoxy adhesive that does three critical jobs all at once. First, it completely seals the joint, which protects those internal steel tendons from rust and corrosion. Second, it fills in any tiny little imperfections between the segments, which is crucial for preventing stress from building up in one spot and causing a crack. And third, it actually helps transfer forces across the joint, letting the two separate pieces act like one solid block of concrete. All right, so now we've got a structure that's incredibly strong and perfectly assembled. But the next secret might actually surprise you. To be strong, a bridge can't be stiff. It has to be able to move. No, I'm serious. A bridge that can't move is a bridge that's eventually going to break. You've got the heat from the sun making it expand, the cold making it contract, and the constant vibration from traffic. A bridge is always in a state of subtle motion, and engineers have to account for every single millimeter of it. This movement is managed by these really cool components called bridge bearings. They sit right between the bridge deck and the piers that hold it up. And the analogy of cartilage in a joint, it's perfect. They absorb all that pressure and allow for smooth, controlled movement, stopping anything from grinding or breaking. So you've got a couple of common types, like roller and sliding bearings. Older roller bearings, well, they have a downside. Their pressure can change as they move, and sometimes parts can even get left behind. That's why today engineers usually go for sliding bearings. They use a super low friction material like PTFE, that's polytetrafluoroethylene, the same stuff in nonstick pans, which just lets the bridge deck glide smoothly back and forth. Okay, but what happens when a bridge isn't a straight line? What about a curved bridge? Well, managing all this movement gets way more complicated. The forces aren't just pushing forwards and backwards, they're pulling along the entire arc of that curve. And this is where the engineering gets incredibly precise.
You've got forces from the pre-stressing we talked about, plus two other slow-moving forces called creep, that's the concrete's tendency to deform over time, and shrinkage as it cures. All of these forces try to pull the bridge tangentially, away from its one fixed point. So as you can see in the diagram, every single bearing has to be oriented perfectly along that tangent line. This lets the bridge breathe naturally along its curve without fighting against itself. It's brilliant.
So far, we've mostly talked about building brand new bridges. But what about improving the ones we already have? Well, that brings a whole new set of crazy challenges.
I mean, think about it. A city gets bigger, and that old two-lane bridge suddenly needs to be 4 lanes. How do you possibly add an entire new section to a bridge while thousands of cars are still driving over it every single day? You can't just shut it down.
The solution is this carefully planned out process called stitching. It's so cool. First, they build the new section right alongside the old one, but they don't connect them. Then comes the most important and maybe surprising step. They wait. They have to wait for months while the new concrete cures and shrinks. If they connected it too early, that shrinkage would literally pull on the old bridge and create dangerous stress. Finally, once the new part is stable, crews come in and stitch the two together, usually at night, using concrete that hardens really fast. Okay, for our final section, let's zoom in on one tiny detail that has a huge impact. Because in bridge engineering, sometimes the smallest choices make the biggest difference.
So take a look at the steel reinforcements inside what's called a skewed bridge deck. That's just one that crosses a river or a road at an angle. The way you lay out these steel bars, the rebar, might seem like a small thing, but it's incredibly important for the bridge's overall strength. Your first thought might be to just lay the rebar parallel to the angled edges of the bridge, right? Makes sense. But it turns out that's actually a really inefficient way to fight against bending forces. The much stronger method is an orthogonal or crisscross grid. That pattern directly fights the primary forces, which makes the bridge way stronger, all just by changing the geometry of the steel hiding inside the concrete. So when you put it all together, the pre-stressing, the epoxy, the bearings, the rebar pattern, you start to realize a bridge isn't just a slab of concrete. It's more like a living, breathing structure, a dynamic system designed to work in perfect harmony, all to control these immense forces and manage constant movement. So the next time you drive across a bridge and you feel that little bump from an expansion joint, or you see the bearings where the deck meets the pier, you'll know you're not just looking at random parts. You're looking at solutions. So the question is, what other hidden engineering are you going to start to notice?